Hi, my name is Homie. I've been in the industry. I have been roasting for almost
6 to 7 years.
okay, yeah.
Oh, that's it? Okay, yes. So Homie is a man with a few words. But if you ask him anything about coffee, I'm sure he is very willing to share also. We also like to talk about his roasting journey for our competition as well. Is it any different from the usual roast that you do for production and for competition?
I think one thing that most of the people, in terms of like the misconception, is like competition must be a very different roast from what you serve normally. For us, what we always do is whatever roasting that we do from day to day is pretty much the same as what we do for the competition. The only thing that is different from the day to day is what the competitor actually wants to like highlight, or what the competitor wants to bring out.
Basically, I get the same. It's more of like for home ground, we don't specially cater competition roast. There's no such thing. Every time when we want to roast a coffee, we believe in bringing out the best potential of the coffee, and that's how we see the roasting philosophy in home ground. And when it comes to roasting in other countries, but especially when it comes to gold, we actually face a lot of different challenges.
I mean, the first thing is when back in 2019, the first Worlds that we went to. So when we went over and we start brewing there, coffee is a bit different as compared to like how we brew it in Singapore. We brought the Ikawa over so that we can roast the coffee. Like the roasting profile actually is very different. The same profile does not work in Boston. With that, we realized that we have more control over like how we can brew towards the environment. So that's why it's still better for us. I mean, we felt that it's better that we actually bring it over to the hosting country, which this year is Melbourne, to roast it there and adjust accordingly to like how we can brew over there, or how the coffee actually reacts to the coffee over there.
So yeah, roasting is definitely one very important element. And another thing that we like to cover or talk about when it comes to competition, coffee is definitely one of the things, because people always ask like, how do you choose coffee for your competition?
Well, definitely, I think first thing first, you must like the coffee. I think for us is pretty much the same in terms of like, I think because we love coffee from Cafe Granta, so that's why we chose them for the competitions that we have been competing with. But of course, like another thing that I usually look at is the scorching. Does it favor the scorching? And as a roaster, I will look at how will they be able to bring out certain multiplier or anything that actually helps to boost the score. So now we're gonna introduce the equipment that Elysia decided to use during the World Brewers Cup.
So when I make certain decisions, the first thing that I always consider is what does it help to contribute to make the cup better. And we always start off with cupping, just like our normal production and how we develop recipes and tasting notes for the coffee. So it always starts with cupping, and from there on you actually can understand the characteristics of the coffee itself. So in my case, actually this coffee that I'm using is from Colombia, from the farm Cafe Granta La Esperanza. So it has a lot of complexities and sweetness in it. So to me, how do I actually pull out the different layers of flavors at the same time introducing flavor clarity to my cup is to use the origami dripper. So there's actually two types of origami dripper right now. This is the origami air, and the other one that we have is the ceramic. So because I want to ensure to give myself a very stable brewing temperature throughout, and more importantly to reduce the amount of variables that's introduced to my brewing, I actually choose to use the air because it's a great insulator of heat and it doesn't take in any heat during the brewing process, meaning that it will not change the brew bed temperature too much due to any thermal induction for the dripper itself, which is why I chose to use the air over the ceramic. We actually use the conical filter paper instead of the Kalita wave because I wanted a much faster flow rate. And what this does is it creates a lot of air pockets on the side, and the flow rate will be much faster as compared to a V60. So that follows through to one of the very important things, which is your grinder. So because you have to travel from country to country, using an electronic grinder, you have to consider first thing first your luggage, the cost of the luggage, and will it go missing? And misalignment of burrs and etc. So there are so many different variables that will be introduced to the situation. Therefore, I make it very simple and straightforward. I use a hand grinder that I trust and I really like, which is the Comandante. And the one that I use is actually Mark IV without the red clicks. And I clean it very often, or rather, he clean it very often. It's Homing and Kang Long that does the grinding, not me.
It's very important to keep the grinder clean because a lot of times after you grind, there's a lot of like microfines that you wouldn't want in the next cup. So after it accumulate for very long, it may affect your next cup quality.
For me, I don't like to have silver skin in my coffee because it kind of adds astringency and bitterness to the cup. So that's why I always use this blower, which is what I call the zit. This helps a lot. And usually after we grind, we actually lay it out on a white bean tray because it's easier for you to see. And if you need to transfer it or anything, it's actually much easier.
Yeah.
For me, I like to pick things that I'm familiar with because when it comes to competition, really it's about reducing the amount of variables that you have to deal with. I do not want to think about like how many grinders, the different type of grinders, the burr size and etc. because I think there are many other things that you have to pay attention to. And I think one thing that we did different this year, or I did different this year, was with the understanding of what we know about humidity, we actually grind the coffee and pay attention to the environment as well because it actually influences your grind size, your flow rate and etc. as well as your sensory experience, which is what I care about. Like the presentation can be very fancy and beautiful, but it is the sensory experience that also matters a lot. At least that's what I care about. I'm a very aggressive brewer, so I don't like a very gentle pour because I enjoy having the control over my flow rate. Whereas Stagg actually gives me a limitation due to how the spout is designed. The flow is very restricted and thin, and that kind of affect my calibration. I feel that if there's a problem, you fix it. What we did was we actually file the spout of the fellow. By filing this part, it actually opens up the fellow and the flow rate is a lot more faster. Yeah, which is what actually helps to contribute to the overall routine. So when it comes to competition, you have to be very selective of what exactly matters and what doesn't. This definitely plays a huge part, but it doesn't value add to my routine, so I did not say it. And I think besides reducing the amount of variables, I think consistency is important, which is why you have to brew like 3 cups at one go. Therefore, I've chosen to use the Ultra Cookie. Ultra Cookie is a weighing scale that allows you to measure your input and output. And I think that is very important because it tells you when you should cut off your brew and to ensure that all the 3 cups are equally tasty. How I see it is like when I brew different coffee, I would know that what is the retention of the water retention with the grinds. You'll be very surprised that different coffee, the retention is very different. So with the amount of data that you have gathered over the time, that will also tell you, is the coffee different? Is it behaving differently? And yeah, from roast to roast, there might be slight difference. So this is actually a very good way to gather data as well. And then the next thing that I like to talk about, because aroma assessment is one of the important components, therefore I'll let the judges assess the aroma via the server instead. And how I pick the server, one thing that I always pay attention to is the opening, how wide or how small, how narrow it is. For me, I like something more narrow because it helps to focus all the aroma volatiles into the center, so it's easier for them to assess. Choosing 500 actually helps because it increases the surface area. It's easier for the judges to swirl if they have to, or even if it's for me, and it gives more area for the volatiles to coat around, and that will once again enhance the aroma. So in Melbourne, it's actually very dry. So when it's very dry, you can imagine yourself to be like on the aircraft, right? That's why all the food on the airplane is always heavily seasoned because it's harder for us to pick up certain flavors, or like most of the flavors, to smell and to taste. So what I did, instead of having them to assess the coffee right away, I actually place a hot bowl of water over it. And what this does is it creates more water vapor within the server itself. And all this water vapor helps to capture more aroma. Basically, it creates more space for the aroma volatiles. And once I remove the lid, the experience will be a lot more enhanced, and it's different as compared to if you were to assess the aroma directly. So this is how we kind of like make use of our experience in Boston to Melbourne. And I believe that's what gave us the advantage. This is something that you can apply in shop. It's nothing fancy that which is only applicable to competition. And I think that's what we always stay true to. Yeah, it shouldn't be something that it's only applicable for competition but not for daily use.
But of course, like you can don't take our word for it. Like you can try it yourself and get a feel of like how different in terms of like the aroma can be with or without.
Besides the dripper, to me the second important thing is actually the cup, because it will actually influence the entire sensory experience, and which is what the judges and probably your customer and consumers will be spending time with. So this is the very crucial part. So I actually bought a few types of cups. What I always look out for is the opening, the thickness of the rim, the colors, the final volume. So because all these will actually influence how your coffee would taste like, which is why when we are in the store, different coffee we actually serve them in different cups to enhance different things. Having a few options actually helps me to further enhance your sensory experience. I mean, of course, the judges can also use cupping spoon, but it's up to you to decide. But for me, I think drinking from a cup, it's what a customer would always do, and I want to duplicate that experience even in competition. So to summarize, I think for us, reduce the amount of variables that you have to deal with, as well as try to improve your consistency from cup to cup. And if this can be easily duplicated, or it has to go through a very fancy setup. But for us, we like it simple but tasty. So yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Chinese.
Yeah.
Life is good.
带一卡瓦过去，自己烘，在那个没有试过的情况。
我哪里知道你在讲什么？减少你不必要的选择以外，另外一个就是提高你的 consistency。
consistency。
为了提高 consistency， 比较容易去how do you say pick up 接受。Oh my god, this is so hard.